The third agreement: don't make assumptions.
The only things that we want to hear are those things that we want to hear. And those things that we want to see is the things that we want to see. And these things called assumptions.
Assumptions is something that you accept as true without question or proof. Every individual tends to assume everything, even the simplest things. It's normal for us to make assumptions and form expectations all the time. In reality, we always make assumptions when we try to anticipate the future or ourselves in hypothetical situations. We build our own expectations based on such presumptions. In order to be well prepared for the future, this is how we plan. What makes assumptions problematic is when we make negative assumptions because we often take them to be true. Believing these negative assumptions will then affect us mentally, as fear will be set in our minds. In the end, how we live our life will be affected. Thought like, I think my boss doesn't like my work. Maybe he's mad because of me. It's all my fault. Once we accept these assumptions are true, we get sad, anxious, bothered, and eventually get stressed because we don't know what the truth really is. Maybe we assume things because it makes us feel better, or for some people, it's their own way of satisfaction. But when we think about it, we are afraid to ask questions, clarifications, so we make assumptions. Thoughts like this can be weapons used to humiliate people or just assume some things that don't have any intentions of hurting an individual.
As quoted,
We make the assumption that we know what the other person wants.
we make the assumption that we know what the other person wants. We have a tendency to make assumptions about people and affect us and how we react towards them because we believe that we already know what the other person truly wants. We assume that our thought is true and thus respond emotionally based on thoughts that lack the power of truth. For example, a girl assumes that her partner loves her because she makes a lot of money and assumes that he will get money out of her, is likely to have a general fear of someone taking advantage of her. This causes her to look for signs of being used for money and react to his partner based on these assumptions. The more presumptions people hold and believe, the more likely it is that this will obstruct not only romantic relationships, but also those with friends, family, and even ourselves. People's presumptions can snowball into a mountain of untruths, and it can quickly become difficult to distinguish between what we have created ourselves and what has actually occurred.
Why we should not make an assumption.
The book, all the sadness and drama you have lived in your life was rooted in making assumptions and taking things personally. This tells us that we are creating irrelevant problems that can cause actual damage, such as emotional and mental damage. Make up thoughts like assuming something without clarifying the truth can start a drama. We assume the worst about what other people are doing or even thinking. We take the situation personally. We put the blame on them. We respond by verbally hurting them. I've been guilty of assumptions before because I haven't heard my parents acknowledge my accomplishments. I believe they weren't proud of me, and because I have formed that assumption, it really brought me down, and I was mistaken. Because when I asked my parents about it, they admitted that they just lacked the word to adequately convey their pride in me.
What is real love?
Long-term relationship will inevitably lose their spark after 3 to 6 month high, where everything feels fantastic. But when those rose-tinted lenses go off, people usually lose their feelings. And this phase will determine whether the relationship will last or not, as this is where people will let go. Assumptions will have to be made to reach the conclusion as soon as possible. Take a married couple for example. The wife had a picture of a perfect image of her husband. However, she was disappointed when she realized he wasn't the kind of person she thought he was. It turns out their value does not match as they have different principles, so on and so forth. We tried to make him change because she thought he should change himself because he loved her. However, this is not what true love is. Real love is all about accepting people the way they are without trying to change themselves. If we try to change someone, it means we don't really like that person. Of course, if we decide to live with someone, it is also better to make an agreement with someone who is already exactly the way you want them to be, and also to accept that person's flaws as well. If you know how to accept someone's flaws, you will be able to find a way to deal with them appropriately. This is where communication should take place, understanding and empathy. Talk to each other, ask him what his values are, what kind of father he wants to be.
Ask questions if you don't understand something. It is better to be clear instead of making an assumption, because assumptions set us up for suffering. According to the book, we should have the courage to inquire further until we are as clear as we can be. Once we receive the response, we won't have to guess because we will already be aware of the truth. On one occasion, we had an online exam and I was confused as to what form should our answer be. Will it be in numerical form or in percentage form? In our module, the answers were in numerical form, so I thought that it would be written just like in the module. So, I decided not to ask our teacher for clarifications, as I also feared that I will only get a scolding instead of an answer because she was a strict teacher. As I finished my exam, I got nervous and anxious because the exam was time limited, and if what I thought was wrong, then I would get a low grade. When the exam was returned, I indeed got a low grade because my assumption was not correct. I even blamed the teacher because she didn't give clear instructions on the format in the first place. I was convinced I was correct. If I had gotten clarification from my teacher, I would have received a high grade, felt at ease, and didn't have to blame my teacher. I should have gotten over my fear and asked. I could have avoided a problem and emotional poison by doing this.
So how can we stop assuming so much and start understanding people and the world based on more verifiable facts?
When we see ourselves leaping to conclusions, we simply stop and question, how do I know this? We run the possibility of assuming the wrong thing if the response to that inquiry is anything other than then. I learned it through looking at the facts or by gathering factual knowledge. We can avoid falling into the trap of making erroneous assumptions and probably avoid a lot of unneeded problems for both ourselves and others if we just pause and conduct our own research before assuming that we know anything.